Good morning, everybody. Notwithstanding the bad jokes and the innumerable puns that this peculiar Americanism called Afghan-Pak lends itself to, I think the world is aware that we're sitting on the edge of a potential crisis, with America's President Barack Obama, at least for now, sticking to the deadline for pulling out troops from Afghanistan. Many people believe that that withdrawal will mark an enhanced destabilization of the entire region. There are others who've begun to see Afghanistan as a proxy battleground between India and Pakistan, arguing that till there is some sort of resolution between India and Pakistan, there can never be lasting peace in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, of course, continues to be trapped in a now well-documented and repetitive cycle which sees outsiders coming in and then abandoning Afghanistan at will. The one good thing that all the tragedy, the trauma, and the conflict in Afghanistan has done is that it's given birth to some absolutely brilliant journalism and writing, both fiction and non-fiction. And on this panel today, I think we're very privileged to have some of the most erudite and accomplished voices from the region who will lend their expertise today to look ahead at what lies ahead for all of us, all of South Asia, and indeed the West. This is one issue that affects us all, because what happens in Afghanistan, Pakistan, by this summer could change the geopolitics of the entire world in some ways, and also to give their prescription for what could be done instead. If I can start with Jayant Prasad. Mr. Prasad, as a diplomat posted in Kabul, you witnessed two very gory attacks on Indian diplomats, and it led to India making the now familiar argument that there are groups that object to Indian presence in Afghanistan. And, you know, it's a thinly veiled reference, in fact, to Pakistan's ISI. There are others who've argued that India and Pakistan have converted Afghanistan into a proxy battleground for what is really their own strategic competitiveness. And India is asked again and again, what are we doing in Afghanistan? We're not a country that has a contiguous border with Afghanistan. Isn't this some sort of part of the return of the great game that we thought we'd buried a couple of decades ago?
Well, that's a very odd way of looking at what we are doing in Afghanistan. It's a legitimate question to ask, what are we doing there? We are in Afghanistan for pretty much the same reason as the rest of the international communities in Afghanistan. We want to prevent Afghanistan from becoming a safe haven for terrorism, because that terrorism affects our lives every day. And to take you back a little bit, in 1998, when the US East African embassies were bombed by the Al-Qaeda, there were reprisals. And those reprisals meant cruise missiles went and rained down on an Al-Qaeda camp in Khost. And the survivors of the 100-odd casualties were in Peshawar hospital. And newspaper reports then by American journalists who visited the injured in Peshawar reported that they were not Arabs, they were not Afghans. They were fighters in a school of jihadism training to fight in different parts of the world, including Jammu and Kashmir. So we have a stake in the future of Afghanistan in peace and stability there. We have an objective there, which is a strategic objective besides helping the Afghan people. And that strategic objective is to have Afghans stand on their feet and take their own decisions. We have a longer-term objective, of course, but we can come to that later.
Ahmed Rashid, you wrote a piece where you argued that the road to Kabul may well travel through Kashmir, and suggesting that this is no longer about Afghanistan per se, this is no longer even about Afghan-Pak, that there is a third country in this that should have been part of this coinage but isn't, and that's India. But many here would argue that that is no longer true, that in fact the moot conflict between India and Pakistan is no longer even Kashmir. And Pakistan is using the Indian presence in Afghanistan as a mere excuse for the Pakistan military, for the Pakistan power establishment to not act effectively against terrorism.
Well, I wrote that piece 2 years ago, and it created a lot of dissension within the Indian establishment. And the Indian
That's why
military.
I brought it up.
Yeah,
you've got the Indian establishment here, and we've got you. So.
I know. Well, I mean, let me say, I think my position has moved on since then. Certainly, India-Pakistan rapprochement is the key to stabilizing Afghanistan.